My name is David Volke. I'm Bob's younger brother. The Volke family wants to support Cascadia because we think that the work they do is extremely important. It's vital to the health of any community, and every community needs it. If Cascadia had not been involved in my brother's therapy, he would have been homeless, he would have been in jail, or he wouldn't have been with us. Bob was always very creative throughout his whole life. He created his own comic books, he did watercolor work, he wrote song lyrics and poetry. He was self-taught on the guitar. He was a fantastic musician. He wrote his own song lyrics. He would come down to Saturday Market and busk on Saturdays and just perform mostly cover tunes, Bob Dylan, Neil Young, that kind of stuff. But he would perform occasionally some of his own work.
We were a military family. Our dad was in the Air Force, and he was a New Yorker. He met our mom in Louisiana when he was stationed there, and they got married at 19 and had 6 kids over the next 12 years. Bob was really extraordinary. He was funny. He was very loving, very kind. You could always have a very good conversation with him because he was really highly intelligent. I remember him just as a really good brother.
He was just a middle-aged man living his life very well. And then the schizophrenia set in.
Schizophrenia didn't even come to my mind because he was in his early 40s, and my knowledge of that is like that's a late teen, early 20s kind of thing.
It was more like walking on eggshells around him. We didn't know which Bob we were going to get when we had him over for dinner or something.
Schizophrenia is a somewhat tough diagnosis to describe because, as the saying goes, if you've seen one person with schizophrenia, you've seen one person with schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is just like any other chronic illness. Some people have very intense and severe symptoms. Some people have very mild symptoms. Generally speaking, schizophrenia affects 1% of the general population. Those 1% of people are prone to having recurrent episodes of what we call psychosis. Psychosis would be a syndrome in which an individual somehow is misinterpreting reality and thinks things that are not real are real. So, for example, common symptoms include hallucinations, generally hearing voices that other people don't hear. The voices are usually negative, derogatory, will tell people to do things that might be against their nature. And as you can imagine, if you're hearing this over and over and over, day in, day out, that can get quite harrowing.
It kind of tore his life apart in a lot of ways. He eventually quit his job. Truck was repossessed. He lost his apartment eventually, and it kind of took his life apart in less than a year.
We didn't know what to do, and it took him getting in the criminal justice system for him to then become part of Cascadia.
We give them education, we teach them lifestyle choices, we help them figure out what they can control so they can return to a higher level of function.
Cascadia as an organization wasn't immediately apparent to me. I never had heard of them, didn't know what they did. Once I kind of found out what their program was, it was like, this is the answer that we have been waiting for. They had an agreement that Bob had to sign off on to be paroled to them, and it was very structured, which is what he needed. They had him go to his clinic. They dispensed his medication. I mean, I cannot tell you everything they did for him. He was a veteran. They got him hooked up with veterans medical. They got him housing, low-income housing. They got him on food stamps. It was exactly what needed to happen to him.
Bob struggled with finding a type of therapy that worked for him. He tried conversation groups, he tried writing. He was finally introduced to Barbara Penn, who was Cascadia's art therapist at the time, and she recognized his talent. Painting gave him a focus.
Art therapy can be a really helpful and important part of treating schizophrenia for those that are interested. For people who are used to expressing themselves through art, or people who learn that they enjoy expressing themselves through art, it can be phenomenal. Art therapy is a wonderful way to allow people who are struggling, even if they're using words, but struggling to get their thoughts out get their communications out, can use these non-verbal things like art to help communicate what they're going through.
Painting gave him focus. He told me that when he was painting, it muffled the voices in his head because he was focusing on this one piece of canvas in front of him. Once he got painting, he would go on binges and paint 24 hours, just knock out paintings left and right. It helped him quiet the voices.
I believe it changed his life, really. I mean, it let him feel like he could have purpose and success. It was a turning point for him in his mental health journey.
I first met Bob in '07. My apartment building was kind of catty-corner to the Starbucks, and every day I would go there to get my coffee, and I would see this guy. And then one day I walked by him and he had some of his artwork out. I've never met anybody quite like him. I mean, he had this horribly dry sense of humor that was amazingly funny at the same time, but horrible. You could tell that he, kind of struggled with some things, but was very approachable and super intelligent. He had a following at Starbucks of people from all walks of life that would come and see him, from CEOs to house cleaners to, he was like a little mayor, but an artist mayor. And I think people were really drawn to that. There was a process in the beginning where his art was very, very dark. For instance, some of the characters didn't have eyes. And as you could see him progress and get better, you could see that through his art. It did show as art became lighter, it became more of who I think Bob really is.
It gave him hope that he could live with his illness. He wasn't allowing his illness to define him. This was a new creative outlet for him, and he was able to nurture that passion for painting and that creativity that he'd always had into something that was physical, that he could see the result of his work and his focus. And anytime he was working on that, he wasn't dwelling on what had happened to him.
He was really intense about his art and very protective. I think sometimes he even thought of not showing his art because he'd have his art. He had a show at Starbucks and it would be on one wall, and he would be in Starbucks and watch how people were reacting to his art.
He always liked his art to be hung like down a hallway or near the bathrooms because he didn't think he deserved necessarily to be hanging in the main part of the gallery. And he would always ask galleries to hang him out of the way somewhere because that's where he felt his art belonged. But in truth, his art stands up with anybody. I remember him calling me once. He said, "You're not going to believe it, but my art is hanging 30 feet from a Picasso." And he was so proud of that moment when he could stand in a real gallery and see his art hanging with all these other amazing artists and know that he belonged.
Cascadia offers a lot of support and help to folks who are diagnosed with schizophrenia as well as multiple other diagnoses. We try to remember that, yes, we're doctors, we're nurse practitioners, we're therapists, which is treating symptoms perhaps of an illness, but it's not treating the person. So we're striving for whole body, whole mind health, holistic care, so that people are doing well and functioning well enough so that they could have that safe place to live. They could have that social group with activities to do with them and be a human being, not be a mental health patient.
I can't imagine going through what Bob did.
He would say schizophrenia is like the movie A Beautiful Mind, but without the beautiful mind. And that has to be really hard to experience. And we stand on the outside and can only imagine what that's like, but he actually experienced that.
I think Bob's intelligence and his sense of humor, which he never lost even when he was ill, and his creativity, those attributes that he possessed helped him survive and live with it and move forward. Here's a man with schizophrenia and he becomes this successful painter. It's kind of the absolute best scenario anybody could hope for. And Cascadia was the reason for that. Their support and the structure they provided him saved his life in many ways and helped him live a life as an artist.
he would be very happy that his art was kind of continuing on in a way that was benefiting other people.
He wanted people to continue to connect and enjoy his art beyond his death. I think Bob would be so happy to see all this going on and just really feeling like, yeah, I knew I could make it. And he would be ecstatic because this is exactly what he had hoped for. And the fact that it's going to help others with the same problems that he has, I think would really humble an already humble man.
Whether I'm wrong or I'm right, whether I'm black or I'm white, whether I do everything that I'm told, whether I'm young or I'm old, yeah, whether I'm hip or I'm square, whether I hate or I care, whether I wear my